I think kind of our claim to fame was that I lost my job working in tech during COVID. And instead of going back to get another job, we kind of went full force into real estate. And in the span of, I guess 24 months, maybe, we went from 3 short-term rentals to 15. Now we're up to just under 30. We've got a boutique hotel that we launched last year, looking for some more acquisitions there. And I've just got a kind of a diverse set of experiences across different types of real estate investing. We flipped, we've done long-term, we've done short-term, we've done hotels. I've had the great fortune of meeting a lot of other incredible investors and picking up on their insights. So, yeah, man, just happy to share whatever I can with the audience today.
Awesome. Well, you're definitely going to have a lot to share. I have a ton of notes here. I know before we hit go, some of the things that I think, just to give the audience some teasers, you've done a lot of really interesting stuff with creative finance. You are not scared to play the location game and find properties all around the country. So let's maybe just talk about your first property ever. So for those listening, they can't see you. You have the beautiful sunny background. Where do you live and where was that first investment property?
So yeah, I'm in Southern California. We're just outside of Los Angeles. And the first deal that I bought was in Shreveport, Louisiana. And most folks probably haven't heard of Shreveport, but it's, I think, maybe like the 3rd biggest metro in Louisiana. I stumbled into that market because my mom and my stepdad had some family out there. They ended up buying a property out there that they lived in briefly. But as I was talking to my mom about this house they purchased, just asking questions, right? Being inquisitive. I hadn't done any deals at that point, right? I was just listening to podcasts, doing the whole thing. And she told us like, yeah, we bought this house and, the bank's going to give us all the money to buy it and to fix it up. And she just kind of keeps going on and on. And I paused. I was like, wait, like, what do you mean? Like the bank's going to give you all of the money? I was like, so like, you don't have to bring anything to the table? And just real nonchalant. She's like, yeah, no, they said they were going to cover it all. Not even realizing like the gold mine that she had found. So I ended up talking to that same bank. And it turns out at the time they had a loan product where if your purchase price and your renovation costs were 72.5%, very specific number, or less than your after repair value, they would fund the whole thing. And once I got that confirmation, that's all I needed to know to kind of dive into that market. I said, hey, I'll figure everything else out. But that was at least how I landed on that market.
And were you a systems guy at this point? Because living in California, buying a rental property in Louisiana, in my head, I'm like, okay, well now, something breaks. Who do I call? How do I know I can trust that plumber or that electrician? Like, how did you build a team thousands of miles away when you first got started?
Yeah. So I think, at the time I couldn't afford to invest in California. Even today, I don't, we have short-term rentals in California, but I don't know if I'd ever buy a long-term rental here. But California just didn't make sense. So I knew early on, like I had already come to terms with the fact that I was going to invest somewhere out of state. So I think that initial fear just kind of quickly subsided because it was like either I go out of state or I don't invest. Like, those are the only options for me. So mentally, I kind of have that going into it. And then in my day job, I worked in supply chain and distribution. And it's almost like similar to like a manufacturing environment where everything comes down to systems and processes and people. And so I had a lot of experience doing that in my day job. So for me, the idea of managing someone didn't seem that far-fetched because that's what I did for a living. Now, I got very lucky because the bank that I was working with was very well connected in that market. And one of the best things about that loan was that once they gave you the money, they didn't actually disperse any funds to you for the rehab. They would pay the contractor directly, but they would only disperse those funds after someone from their team went and did a walkthrough. So when I heard that, I was like, well, this is actually great. This is my first time doing this. I don't really know what I'm looking for, right? I don't really know what questions to ask this contractor. But the fact that someone on their team was going to validate all the work before anyone got paid, that was like another layer of confidence for me to do this remotely. So the bank was super critical in helping me manage the rehab remotely. They helped me find my agent and really helped me kind of put that whole team together.
That's one hell of a banking partner.
Dude, I'm telling you, man.
This is just like a local credit union in Louisiana, or?
It was, man. It was a local credit union, and I was able to get the loans there because I had family there, right? You have to live, work, or worship in like their service area, but because I had family there, that qualified for them. So yeah, I was super, super fortunate to come into contact with them. But Cody, I think I believe that's like one of the most untapped resources for folks who are looking to scale up in real estate is finding that small local regional bank because they have so much more flexibility. than Chase or Bank of America. And they have a much stronger desire to have you as a client because they're not spending billions of dollars every single year to acquire new clients. So if they get the right opportunity, there's a stronger just like connection. And like I could pick up the phone and call the vice president of the bank and talk to them about the deal. Whereas, I can't call the VP of Bank of America and have that same kind of pool. So I would encourage everyone to explore those small local regional banks.
I cannot emphasize this enough. I've had friends who are like, Cody, it's just too tough. So I'm in Massachusetts. I've had friends looking for investment properties here. They call one bank, one singular bank that's like Chase or Bank of America. They probably just typed in mortgage lender and that they show up at the top of search results. And they're like, I just don't know how I'm going to do it. They want 25% down. They want all these things. It's like, well, go to the mom and pop bank, the small credit union right down the road. And you might your cousin might be best friends with the loan officer. Like working with these small town banks, you're right. There's so much more gray area to play with and it gives you flexibility. So for this first property, you followed in your mom's footsteps and it was 100% covered.
It was 100% covered. And I just want to add one last piece, Cody, on the local regional banks. I kind of compare like lenders to the ice cream industry. And I think a lot of people don't understand this, but it's like I can go to Baskin Robbins. I can go to Cold Stone, like name the ice cream chain, Dairy Queen. They all sell ice cream, right? Like the product is ice cream, but they all sell different flavors. I can't go into Dairy Queen and ask them for the flavors they sell at Ben and Jerry's and vice versa. And it's very similar in the mortgage industry where they're all selling mortgages, but they all have different flavors of what they can offer. And if you only talked to, Ben and Jerry's, you're never going to get the amazing flavors that are at Cold Stone. So I would encourage every single person to talk to as many lenders as possible. And the hack for doing this now, we're lucky we live in the age of artificial intelligence. I actually did this on one of our podcasts on the Rookie Show, but I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of 100 local regional banks within a 50-mile radius of my house. And it went off, it did all the research, and it came back to me with a list that didn't include Bank of America, didn't include Chase, didn't include Wells Fargo. And now I've got this database of places that I can go, pick up the phone and go talk to them and see what they can offer. So it's so much easier today than it was when I even first started.
So much easier. Okay, we're already starting to drop some gold nuggets here. I'm glad we're starting out so hot. So actually, I think you recorded a recent reel while we're recording this. I think I just watched this short yesterday, today. I'm not even sure. But talk about the pros of lower cost houses, because a lot of people might hear Louisiana, Ohio. Why would I ever want to buy a house there? Like that, those places suck. I've heard that so many times. But there's a lot of pros when it comes to buying more affordable homes, more affordable rental properties.
I think that every investor has to understand what their motivation is for investing in real estate. And if your motivation is long-term appreciation, like, hey, I love my day job, I'm going to stay there forever, and I just want something to help support me in retirement, then yeah, absolutely. Buying in markets that are super heavy on appreciation makes a ton of sense, right? Because you're not going to touch it. You're not going to do anything for the next 20, 30 years. By the time you retire, everything's going to be great. If you want to focus on cash flow, like actual money in the bank at the end of every single month, then sometimes you need to focus on markets that maybe won't get the same amount of appreciation, but will outperform in terms of cash flow, right? So understanding what your motivations are. The second thing that you have to ask yourself is, what are the resources you have access to? Because maybe appreciation is what's most important to me. But if I don't have appreciation money, if I don't have appreciation down payment, it doesn't matter, right? Like my resources are going to limit what kind of asset I can go out there and purchase. So I think for the person that either A, doesn't have the capital to invest in a market that's highly appreciating, that's above the median national average of home price, or B, the person that's really focused on trying to generate cash flow and get the best cash on cash return, those Midwest, under $300,000, $200,000 markets, there's so much opportunity there. So that, I think it's a personal decision, but if you really want to maximize what you have, you can really get that in those types of markets.
And I definitely want to talk about lower cost homes for short-term rentals, specifically. Later on, we haven't talked about short-term rentals yet, so let's table that. Just want to plant the seed in your mind. So at some point, you start buying these rental properties in Louisiana. At some point, you decide, you know what, I'm going to go the short-term rental route. I think there's more cash flow. There's more possibility over here. Can you talk about what flipped that switch in your mind and how you went about taking action on it?
Yeah, so I actually only started investing in long-term rentals because I wanted to build my track record so that I could eventually become an apartment syndicator. Like that was my goal from the very beginning. I said I want to syndicate apartments. Like, my goal was to leave my job, and I knew that buying the single-family homes was going to take longer than I wanted. But I saw apartments, I saw the cash flow, I saw the acquisition fees, all those things. Like, hey, that's what I want to do. But I'd never done a deal before, so who's gonna lend me money? And I didn't have a brand at that time, so I had nothing. So I said, okay, cool. Let me just build a track record. So that was the goal when I first started. So we did 4 transactions on the single family long term rental side, and I was like, okay, cool. I did it. Track record done. Let's go try and raise some money. Let's go try and find some deals. But this was right around the time that COVID started. So it was like early 2020, and deals just like across the board just like dried up. And even more so for someone who's like a first time syndicator with no track record and actually being able to successfully raise money. No one's sending you anything, or what they are sending you are the deals that no one else wanted, and like nothing made sense. So my partner and I at the time were just kind of like sitting on the sidelines waiting for, I don't know, to see what's next. And a buddy of ours buys this cabin in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Again, I'm in California. I had never even heard of Pigeon Forge. Didn't even know where it was at on the map. But he was like, dude, I bought this cabin. And he kind of showed us, hey, here's what I'm thinking it'll do. And when we saw the numbers, I was like, holy crap, like this, like something's here. So we jumped in pretty quickly, sight unseen. We bought our first cabin in the Smoky Mountains. And for comparison's sake, the first long-term rental that I purchased, again, we had no cash into it at the end of the day. So it was still a really good, it was an infinite return, but we were cash flowing about $150 a month, not life-changing money. The first short-term rental that we purchased cash flowed over $80,000 that first year. Insane. So once we saw that, I was like, okay, we're going to pivot and we're going to see how far we can take this thing. Now, obviously, that was peak of COVID, right? So those revenues and those cash flows have come down, but still, we're getting a very healthy return on the investments that we're buying. So that's what it was for me, man. I just saw the opportunity and said, hey, let's see how far we can take it.
So did you just, okay, I did this in Louisiana. Now let's just basically see if I can replicate the system, but for short-term rentals in Smoky Mountains. So like, how did that even happen? Did you have a magic lender again? Or like, how did you go about building out the team and having the confidence to go and do that? Because you're probably at that point, Louisiana's going pretty good and you already have all these connections and everybody. Now you're picking up, going to an entirely new market where it sounds like you had no connections there at all. You didn't even go and visit the place.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually didn't see it until after we closed on it. But honestly, it was this really crazy moment in the short-term rental industry where everyone was there was a lot of people jumping in during that summer. And we had got connected with some other investors who were also going into that market. And there was just like this one Facebook group that we were all in together and just like sharing resources. And that Facebook group was super, super helpful for me as we got started. And I found my cleaner from a recommendation of one of my other friends who had a cabin out there. My lender actually came from a recommendation from my agent, Avery and Lou Carl, if you know them. So like, it's just like one person led to the next. And we actually had a PM, a property manager for the long-term rentals. But when we did the short-term, my wife had left her job earlier that year voluntarily. And I was like, hey, you're not working right now. Like, can you try and manage this whole short-term rental thing for us? So that's when she came into the business when we made that transition. And she did a lot of the heavy lifting on like the day-to-day management, which allowed me to focus on finding the next deals and raising the capital and scaling the portfolio.
And now, something you casually mentioned at the beginning, most people, when I think you were in a pretty high power job, right? In 2021, I think I heard you're managing like 500 people or something across the nation. Right?
Yeah. I had a pretty big team before I left my W-2 job.
So that's a legit job. It's not like you get fired from you were a fry cook at Denny's. Like you had a legit job. You leave that job, you get booted. Some people that might crush their whole world. They might go into debt. You're like, nah. I'm going to try to build up like the most monstrous Airbnb short-term rental portfolio I possibly can. So what happened that year in 2021? It sounds like at the beginning, you're like, hey, your wife, like, hey, Sarah, can you like figure this out? I'm going to keep doing the thing on my day job. I'm just like still look for properties, but you weren't all in. Then you kind of get forced all in 2021 by getting laid off. Tell us about that next year, man, because it sounds like crazy growth.
It was crazy. It was a lot of movement, a lot of work. But I lost my job on December 23rd, 2020. So it was literally 2 days before Christmas. And after it was initial shock, right? And I just kind of said, okay, cool. Let me just get through the end of the year. Let me enjoy the holidays with my family, and I'll figure out what to do when the new year comes. So I ended up lining up a few interviews like that first week of the new year, and I thought I'd crush it. There were jobs I was very much qualified for, and I didn't get them. And then I reached out to one of my old employers who I left on good terms with, and I said, hey, here's what I've been doing since I've been gone. Do you have a comparable position for me? And they're like, hey, we love you. We'd love to have you back, but it's going to be at the same position you were when you left, which is, like a massive demotion from what I had kind of grown to. And that was like I guess the straw that kind of broke the camel's back for me. And I had to ask myself this question of, do I want to go back into the workforce, like the same workforce that just chewed me up, spit me out, and showed me how little I meant to it? Or do I want to bet on myself? And we were in a fortunate position where we had money saved. We had some runway. And I told my wife, I was like, hey, what if we just take the next 12 months and we see how far we can grow this thing? And if it doesn't work, fine, I'll go back. It's like, hey, that's the worst case scenario is I just get another job like everyone else. Best case scenario is that we figure this out and we have something we can actually build for the future. And that's what we did, man. We really put our nose to the ground and we were just grinding. And because I lost my main source of income, I didn't really have the capital anymore to go out there and plop 10, 20% down for down payments like I was doing before. And it forced us to kind of change our model for scaling. And that's when we really started leaning heavily into partnerships and raising capital from other people and leaning into our expertise of finding the deals, setting them up, managing them. And that's how we were able to go in, 12 months from 3 Airbnbs to 15.
And on the personal finance front, would you consider yourself frugal? Do you have a really high savings rate? Because I think for a lot of people who make a lot of money spend a lot of money. And being laid off from that job and then not getting the next job and taking probably a huge income hit, it's probably pretty scary unless you have some kind of a cushion, some kind of a nest egg, some kind of a financial runway to lean back on and be like, okay, I got the cash for 1 year. If we can't make this work for whatever reason, we're not even breaking even, I'll go back to work. But did you have like a pretty good cash cushion, or what did it look like in the personal finance front?
We did, man. I mean, I consider myself so incredibly lucky because I got hired by Tesla before their stock like really went bonkers. And like that, I had my base pay, which, like, I don't know, healthy 6-figure salary base pay. But the largest portion of my income was our restricted stock units, right? So I got company stock for being an employee. And then I also bought additional stock because we were able to buy it at a discount. So I just had, I was dumping a lot of my extra money into the stock. And dude, I think the last year that I worked there, maybe a fourth of my income was like my base pay. And the other 3/4 was just money from our stocks. And we had set up our life where we could live off of just my base pay. So we were really just like saving all of those, all of the income coming from the stocks. And that gave us like a pretty decent runway. And that's how we were able to make it through that first year.
Well, it sounds like you more than made it through that first year. You went from like 3 to 15 short-term rentals, and it sounds like the first one. You said the first one alone profited you $80K in that first year.
It was nuts, man.
Were all the ones after that similar? Like I'm just doing numbers in my head. I'm like, that's $800K in profit. Okay,
that was the best deal. That was the best deal by far. It's still my best deal to this day. We just bought it at a great time. It was in a great location. But yeah, I wish every deal was doing that great.
Okay, so things obviously work. They're taking off. You're like, I'm not going back to Tesla or any other job like that. Your wife is now helping and working in the business with you. Mm-hmm. What's next? You guys just continue to scale your Airbnbs? And actually, one thing I want to highlight is, so you jump from Louisiana to Smoky Mountains. You make another transition at some point, right? Where you're like, you know what? I'm going to go look in a third market that I undiscovered that I don't have any contacts in, or maybe fewer contacts.
So we went from Tennessee, and then we actually do end up investing in California in the Joshua Tree market. And we're about 90 minutes away from JT. And when we saw the success we were having in the Smokies, we said, okay, well, like the national parks seem to work well. Are there any other national parks? And JT was in our backyard. So we went there, and that's where the heaviest concentration of our portfolio is today. And then a year ago, we bought our first hotel, like a boutique hotel motel in the Zion National Park area. So we've kind of been following the national park scene as we've built our portfolio.
Can we talk a bit about acquiring Airbnbs with no money down? I know there's a couple different ways to do this, and money is usually one of the biggest obstacles people face when buying real estate. They're like, well, I don't have 20% down, I don't have 25% down, whatever, to buy this property. It sounds like we already covered the credit union on the long-term rental front, but can you talk about like some of those strategies that you've since used to acquire your massive Airbnb portfolio and how you've like not put money down on some of them?
Yeah, so there's a few different like strategies, I guess, that we've employed to help us scale the portfolio, right? So the first is just us capital that we have putting down, 10 to 15%. The 10% down second home loan was an important part of our growth strategy. That was also part of the reason, Cody, that we had to move around to different markets, was because that loan doesn't allow you to have two properties in the same market. So you've got to spread around if you want to keep scaling with that type of loan. So that was the first Airbnb that we bought, was with 10% down second home loan. One of the other strategies that we've employed is like the BRRR strategy, right? We're buying things undervalued, renovating them. We're able to get back out most of our capital. That was working really well when the market was going bonkers, right? Because like the values were just going up and up and up. But the biggest part of our portfolio on the single family side was the partnerships and raising money from other investors who like the idea of investing in short-term rentals, but don't have the time, desire, or ability to do it themselves. And, they would typically bring all the cash. We have a few deals where we brought some, but typically they were bringing all the cash for down payment, closing costs, and setup. And then we would handle everything else. We were the day-to-day managers. We were, me and my wife would get shipments and shipments of stuff at our front door. We'd fill up a U-Haul, go spend a few days in Joshua Tree building these things out, take our son along with us and have him build and stuff too. So it was a lot of work, and that's how we made it a fair exchange.
And let's talk pre-BiggerPockets, pre-YouTube, pre-Instagram, Tony, so you can be on the same level as everybody else. But like, how do you get people to say yes to you? You know what I mean? Like a lot of people might not even know where to start. How do you network? How do you get someone to trust you with that amount of money?
Yeah. So the first partner that we got, Cody, she actually found me pre-BiggerPockets. She found me pre-YouTube channel. And the way that she found me was I had a podcast before BiggerPockets called Your First Real Estate Investment. And I launched this podcast before I even had my first real estate deal. And all I did was I interviewed other investors about their very first deal. And I did this while I was working my day job. And initially, Cody, I was putting out an episode a day. So Monday through Friday, there was an episode a day dropping. Burnout started to get the best of me. So I dropped down to 3 days a week. And I did that for a year. And that is where I found my first partner, was me just like going out there and trying to figure out how can I get my name in front of more people and build my network, because I didn't have anyone in my personal life that had the means to invest in real estate with me. I didn't have a rich uncle. I didn't have friends and family who could do this. So I was like, okay, if it's not in my current network, I've got to find ways to expand my network. But I also know that I'm fortunate in the sense that I am comfortable talking in front of a microphone. And I think I do a decent job of being a podcast host, but not everyone can do that. So I think the advice that I always give to folks, anyone can do this, is to start a local meetup in your own city. It's the easiest thing to do. Because all you have to do is go to meetup.com, go to the BiggerPockets forums, go to your local Facebook groups. Hey, hosting a meetup, this place, this time, hope to see you there. And then you stand at the front door and say, hey, I'm Tony, nice to meet you. What's your name? What's your email address? What's your phone number? And if you do that enough, you'll start to meet people. So I chose the route of like doing it digitally because that's what leaned into my skill set. But for everyone that's listening, just start a meetup. Be that person in your own local community.
I love that. And there's so many more people out there with more money more money than they know what to do with. And like, you don't understand that on the come up. I didn't understand that at all. But once you're on the other side of it and maybe you have more money than time, you're like, oh, there's Joe Schmo from my town actually has all this money sitting in his 401k, sitting in his brokerage account, sitting in his bank account, whatever. He doesn't want to do the work. He doesn't want to outfit an Airbnb. He doesn't want to get his boots dirty. He just wants to give someone money and get a percentage of the profit. So I think this is so much more attainable than most people think it is. I love that host local meetups recommendation. All right. So let's get on to boutique hotels. And so you're doing short-term rentals for a while. You kind of got the hospitality game down, which that's all boutique hotels is, just at the next level. What was the kind of launch of that plan? Like, what made you want to branch out? I think by the time you had by the time you purchased that boutique hotel, you probably had like, was it 25 or 30 short-term rentals in your belt?
Yeah, we did a lot, and I feel like we had not gotten tired of it, right? I don't know if that's the right, but we were just ready for a new challenge. And we were trying to figure out, okay, what's the next move for us? And we have a lot of tiny homes in our portfolio. We've got like 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. But we were thinking, okay, either the next thing that we're going to do is either scale up to like the massive, 10, 12 bedroom properties, that are $1 million, $2 million, or we're going to scale into commercial. And the reason we wanted to do that was because, again, we raise a lot of capital for our deals. And while it's great to be able to get into a deal with no money, it also means you're splitting those profits with someone else. And we've got a portfolio of, call it 30 Airbnbs, or we could have a portfolio of 15 that we own by ourselves, right? So there's more management, more overhead, all of those things. So the idea of scaling up to something bigger was, okay, there's a bigger pie for us to split with the folks that are bringing the capital. The reason that we chose commercial versus just like big Airbnbs, 2 things. Number one, what I just mentioned, that revenue potential. But the second piece, Cody, that was big for us was the ability to control the value of the asset. The downside with single family Airbnbs is that the value, at least today, is still tied to comparable sales. It doesn't matter how much revenue that property's doing, right? A bank is only going to appraise that property based on comparable sales. Now, there are some lenders out there that are starting to get into like, hey, we'll try and project revenue, but most of the time it's going to come down to what did, Joe and Jane's house next door sell for. And I think that puts a cap on the type of value you can really extract from that asset. When you go to commercial, the value is based on the net operating income and the prevailing cap rate. And if I can influence the NOI to go up, I can get, exponentially more value from that property. So that was the thought process for me in terms of making that transition was, hey, there's just more revenue to be had, the ability to control the asset. And then the final piece that I didn't really realize until afterwards, but it's been huge, is just the economies of scale. So the hotel that we bought is 13 rooms. And without doubt, without any doubt in my mind, managing that 13-room hotel is so much easier than managing 13 single family Airbnbs. Like there's no comparison. So there is this economies of scale, this ease of management that came with the commercial side as well.
Okay. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that with this boutique hotel, or maybe it was one of your Airbnb investments, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was this seller financed or did you get some help on the financing side?
It was seller financed.
Okay, I did my homework right.
You did. And Cody, that was like another big thing that pulled this in was that there's an entire generation of people who are retiring that either their kids don't want it, they don't want to do it anymore, and they're looking to dispose of these assets. And because they're small mom and pop run places, they don't have the best books. And we get P&L sometimes that look like they were, written on the back of a napkin. And no bank is going to underwrite that type of deal. And I think those sellers understand that. So there's this openness of offering seller financing in the small boutique hotel and motel space that isn't as easy to find in some other asset classes. So our literal buy box was that we were only targeting properties that were offered seller financing because we wanted those types of terms. And we were lucky enough to find that with this deal.
All right. So I think we hit on, actually, no, I have one other creative financing. That was one of the things I really wanted to highlight because, dude, you've been so creative in not only your financing, but also just like the management, where you're finding properties. One more strategic financing that I read in some podcast or blog, I don't even remember all the sources that can't even cite them all now. Did you take a line of credit out against like your stock portfolio? It sounds like because you had so much Tesla stock too. It's like, why not take a line of credit out, right?
Yeah. So we actually did, man. And this is when we were still doing long-term rentals. So we had bought a property that we were looking to BRRR, and it was super, super cheap. Again, Louisiana, I think we bought it for like, I don't know, $30,000, something crazy like that. But yeah, my brokerage account would, and this was when rates were super low, so it was great. But my brokerage account would allow you to use your stocks as collateral against a loan, basically, right? So it was like almost like a credit card, right? But it was like collateralized by your stock portfolio, and the rate was super great. And yeah, dude, I use that to buy and rehab a property, and I've since heard that lots of other folks have gone on to do the same thing. So it's a pretty cool story.
Is there any other creative financing or no money down strategies that I'm missing here? I have 5
Dude,
written down, so
yeah.
you're really hitting on a lot of them.
Dude, and I guess I never even took time to like take stock of all the different things we've done. But yeah, the seller financing, the partners, the local credit unions, just working with traditional lenders. Yeah, I think those are all the ones that come to mind for me, at least.
Okay, well, we can always add that in post if we think of something else.
Yeah.
But one thing I promised we'd come back to, and I heard you mention this in another podcast, was it is much better for short-term rentals if, let's say, you have $100,000 to invest. To invest in a short-term rental that you only need, say, 50 or 60K down, and then to spend the extra on furnishings, rather than get a nicer, bigger house, put 100K down, and then you end up just getting stuff off like Facebook Marketplace and the cheapest stuff off Wayfair and Amazon. Could you just explain that rationale and why that's so true?
Cody, let me just kind of give like the macro of the short-term rental industry, like the history of it really quickly, right? Like what worked in 2018 as an Airbnb did not work in 2020. And what worked in 2020 did not work in 2022. And even what was working in 2022 is no longer working in 2025. So the industry has matured at a rapid clip post-COVID. And we saw immediately after COVID, there was this massive influx of investors looking to cash in on this quote unquote gold mine of Airbnb investing. And because of the crazy amount of interest in the space, there were just a lot of folks who got in that had no business being Airbnb hosts, just like point blank period. They didn't understand what it actually took to provide a good product. So a lot of interest. Then it dips down probably late 2022, 2023. But 2024 was almost like a year of stabilization. And I mean that in the sense of supply like the rate of increase of supply dramatically decreased, right? It was like, I don't know, supply was increasing at like 20% or something crazy like that, post COVID. And now it's down to like single digit growth, which is something that's more sustainable, right? But what that also means is that the people who are left, the folks who are still doing it, are the people who are good enough to make it through that compression, that contraction. So you're now not competing against the grandpa and the grandma who just thought, oh, I got this cute little house. Let me throw it up on Airbnb. You're competing against the people who are doing this as a business, the people who have really figured it out. And even in our own portfolio, we've seen that we've had to go back and reinvest to make sure that we're still competing at the rate that we were competing at before. Even right now, like we're building a pool, one of our properties in Joshua Tree. We just finished one last year. So like there's always something that you need to be doing to improve it. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to buying their Airbnbs is that they only think about the acquisition and they don't think about the actual setup and the experience. And I would even almost, Cody, go so far as to say that if you've got $100,000, I wouldn't even go 50-50. I would go like 30-70,
Okay.
Like I would take $30,000 and have that cover my down payment and the other 70 go into the setup, because it's even more difficult today. Like the bar is even higher today, I should say, to be a top performing property than it was even just 24 months ago.
So can we get super tactical? I know you've talked about this at length, Tony. And I just want to break down like basically all the systems, processes, websites, things that you're using for short-term rental, because that's your bread and butter now. I'd say that's probably the majority, right? Like I was going to maybe ask about long-term rentals. You have the boutique hotel. That's kind of newer, but you've been you've been dominating the short-term rental market for a couple of years now. Let's talk about like just identifying good short-term rentals. What metrics are you using? What websites are you using? How do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So for identifying, right? So there's a couple tools that I use for market selection. AirDNA, I think it has the best data out there for helping you understand the trends within a market. And specifically the data that I'm looking at is kind of what we talked about, right? So AirDNA will tell you the percent increase in supply in a market. It'll tell you the percentage change in occupancy, in ADR, and in RevPAR. RevPAR stands for revenue per available room. It's just like a combination of your average daily rate and your occupancy, but it's an important metric in this industry. And then I want to look at the raw number of listings, like just how many total listings are in that market. And I can get a decent snapshot of a market by looking at those 4 or 5 things, because if there's an imbalance, I'm going to see it in one of those KPIs, right? So that's what I'm looking at. Once I've found just at like a 30,000 foot level that the market looks good, as we drill down, when we're looking at specific properties, and this is like me maturing as well as we're looking for our next acquisition, is I guess there's a few things. The first thing that I want, Cody, is like a moat. Think about like the old castles. I want some sort of moat around the property that I'm buying. And when I talk about moat, it's ideally things that can't be purchased after the fact. I can buy a pool. I can buy a really cool game room. I can buy a golf simulator. Those are all things that I can purchase. But when I think about a moat, it's something that's like inherent to the property. It could be proximity to some attraction, right? If you're in a beach market, you could have a shitty listing. But if your shitty listing is on the sand, you're typically going to outperform the great listing that's 5 blocks away, right? So proximity. Views could be big in some markets as well, right? Another one, and this is one that's kind of landed on me recently, Cody, but it's land availability. Part of the reason that beach markets are, I think, have such high demand is because they're not building more ocean and beaches, like what's there is fixed. And I think the challenge that we saw in a market like Joshua Tree was that there was such an abundance of land, and developers saw that opportunity early on, and supply exploded because there was just so many places to expand to. But if you've got water that's, one natural barrier, if you've got mountains, that's another natural barrier, or if you just got a pretty developed and mature market already where the majority of the open land's been done, I think the risk of supply going crazy is a little bit more constrained, right? Because you think about a market with a lot of open land, not only are there people converting existing properties, traditional long-term rentals, primary residences into short-term rentals, there's people building as well. So you're competing on both ends. So land availability is another one. But I want to try and find some kind of moat, right? Is there something that's inherent to this property that is just unique that someone else can't just go out there and buy and replicate? Once I've identified that, then it's just looking at purchase price, right? Like, what am I buying this for? What do I think this property is going to do from a revenue perspective? AirDNA, Price Labs, both of those are great tools to help you estimate your revenue cost or your revenue potential. And then it's just, hey, what are my expenses, right? Obviously it's a short term. So not only do you have your typical stuff, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, but you've got your utilities costs, you have your cleaning fees, you have your consumables, you have much more repairs and maintenance. So taking all those things into account. And I think today, Cody, interest rates at, 7-8%, depending on what loan product you're looking at. If you can get like a 15% cash on cash at an 8% interest rate, that's a good deal. That's a good deal.
Agreed. All right. So I think I want to skip over the actual purchase process. And we talked a little bit about, ask ChatGPT, hey, give me 50 local lenders in my area. They'll give you all the lenders. Hit 1 million of them up, see who will give you the best terms. Yeah. One thing I bet you have really good systems for is actually managing these Airbnbs, managing these properties. I mean, you have to be so much more hands-on with an Airbnb than you do with a long-term rental. Like, I had a long-term renter whose sink in the kitchen was broken for a year and they didn't bother telling us. Like, we went there and we're not like running the sink, so we had no idea. But with an Airbnb, that can't slide. Like, you're gonna get the plumber there ASAP. So you got to have rock solid systems. You got to have someone constantly being on the messages in case someone can't get in or there's some other whatever. There's a million things that could go wrong. You have a pool now. You probably need pool maintenance pretty regularly. We have a hot tub at one of our Airbnbs. There's so much. So could we just, I know that's very open-ended, but can we just talk about like the systems for actually managing one of these properties, whether it's people, systems, websites, whatever you got?
Yeah. So I'll give you, you kind of you nailed those buckets, Cody, but it's people, it's processes, and it's the tools, right? From a people perspective, so we self-manage all of our Airbnbs, right? But from a people perspective, we have all of our vendors. So we have cleaners, that service the properties every time that someone checks out, gets it ready for the next guest. We have handymen in each market that handle the small things that break and tear, whatever it may be. We have service professionals, so those are like your licensed plumbers, electricians, and those sorts. Those three kind of make the foundational team for your on the ground, right? Now, the layer that we have internally for our own business are virtual assistants, and those team members give us almost 24-hour support for virtually everything. And our VAs do a lot. Our VAs are I think, some of maybe the from other folks that I've spoken to, they're very, very well equipped, but they do guest messaging. They do all of our scheduling for our cleans. They do all of our inventory supply ordering. They call Airbnb when there's issues. Like they really are our first and second line of defense for a lot of the day to day. And then we just deal with the bigger things, the bigger issues as they come up. That's the people side. On the process side, things that I do just to make sure that I'm like in the loop. Our VAs, we have, we use Slack to communicate with our team, but our VAs every morning when they start their shift, they send me a start of shift report. So, hey, are you logged into all the right software? Are there any open issues passing over from the last shift? Anything that I need to know as you start your shift. They give me a middle of shift report. Hey, are all the check-in codes generated? Are the rooms ready? Like where are we at on getting all the turns done for the day? Then they give me an end of shift report, right? So just like snapshots throughout the day to make sure I'm in line with where our properties are. Then we have a 30-minute huddle every day. And we just go over, hey, who are the people coming in? Who are the people that are going out? What are the open maintenance issues that we need to focus on? And that meeting's super quick, super tactical, but it gives me the ability to keep my finger on the pulse and also give my team feedback on, hey, you actually, you said this to that guest, but I probably would have phrased it this way. Or, man, this is actually a gap in our process. We need to update our SOP to make sure we do it this way next time. So I love that meeting. I found a ton of value in it. We literally do it every single day. And then once a week, Cody, and this is, again, one of those things that takes time, but it's a well worth the investment. But we do a KPI review every single week. And in that KPI review, we look over all of the reviews that have come in that are less than 5 stars. Like 5 stars, the gold standard in Airbnb. Anything less than 5 stars, we sit down as a team. We say, what happened? What was the root cause? Was it just one-off guest who maybe, had unreasonable, like we never could have made them happy? Was it the cleaners, right? Was it a bad clean? Was it operationally something that we did wrong that was like truly our fault that we need to fix? So we just root cause. What was the actual issue with this review? And then we come with a corrective action. Maybe it's just passing feedback along to the cleaners. Maybe it's sending a refund. Maybe it's saying, who cares, right? Nothing we could have done. We always try and identify what the corrective action is. And I think doing that week over week gives you a really good sense of what you need to be focusing on in your business. So that is the process side. And the tech is probably the easiest, man. I mean, we use Price Labs for dynamic pricing, Guesty for our property management software. We use Hostfully for our digital guidebook. And then we use Breezeway, which is one of my favorite tools for managing cleaning and maintenance. So those 4 kind of make up the bulk of our tech stack.
And in terms of sourcing these people, it sounds like you have a lot of irons in the fire. You have all the VAs. I don't know if they're offshore or if they're US. It sounds like you have people spanning a bunch of time zones. You also have to get cleaners in multiple markets. You have to get handymen in multiple markets, licensed electricians, plumbers in multiple markets. Are you just like working with a huge database? Like, is it like a spreadsheet? Do you use some kind of a CRM? How do you keep things organized?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So we actually use Monday.com to like keep us on track with everything. And for each market, we have like a service provider board. And on that board, we have, hey, here's all the HVAC professionals that we've used in the past. Here's all the electricians. Here's all the plumbers. So if our VAs have an issue that the handyman can't fix, they know to go back to that service provider board to find, who's the professional we've worked with before. And then same thing for our cleaners. We have like a board with all of our cleaners, their contact info and all that. So we do our best to try and keep it as organized as we can. It's not perfect, but it's been working for us.
And do you find these people off recommendations, or are you using like Turno, whatever it's called? It used to be Turnover B&B for cleaners.
And like Turno. A little bit of everything, man. Some recommendations, like if the handyman knows someone like, oh yeah, I know this electrician who you probably need to call to come check it out. Sometimes it's scouring Facebook groups, if we need to, like, we're having a really hard time with our hotel right now because it's a little bit more of a remote city. And, so there it's like, yeah, dude, we're just taking whoever we can find from anywhere, to come and do it. But yeah, it's a combination, man. We're scouring the internet. We're looking through Facebook groups. We're getting recommendations.
All right. I love this. I'm such a nerd when it comes to process because so many people from the outside don't realize that the makings of any good business is the SOPs. It is this stuff. It's your weekly check-ins for KPIs that you're talking about. It's like all these things matter so much. And the people that are just winging it, like, answering guests late and, oh, I totally forgot about the leak at that house. Like those people are the people you're competing against. So if you have rock solid systems, you're just going to be crushing the competition.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned, as we close this thing out, you mentioned in one podcast that your goal is $1 billion real estate enterprise. Is that still the goal? And why that ambitious of a goal?
You know, Cody, you're hitting on something that's like an existential crisis for me right now. So, you know, I mentioned at the top of the podcast that we went from one kid to three in less than 24 months. And I think during that time frame, our oldest is 17, right? So I set that goal as he was like entering young adulthood. But now we've got two young kids, right? Two kids under two. And it's just such a different era of parenting. And I truly do believe with like every fiber of my being that we have the resources and the ability to build that portfolio to that figure. Like I don't think it's a matter of can we do it. I think the bigger question now is, do I want to work that hard in this season of my life? And I haven't been able to find good answers to that, man. So we are looking for more hotels. But am I at least in the next 18 years, and my kids are still my two youngest are still young, am I going to work that hard to really get to $1 billion? I don't know, man. So right now I'm just trying to enjoy the success that we've had, be a little bit more selective about the deals that we take down, and build a portfolio that continues to support the life and lifestyle that we want to live.
I love that answer. I was honestly curious for myself as well, because I've been in the same boat where I'm like, I think I could hit $1 billion in net worth if I wanted to. But that's the big question is, do I want to do that? I don't know. I might be fine at 100 million or like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And you feel kind of weird and guilty at that point. You're like, I know I'm at these income numbers now, like with compound interest, yada, yada, yada. Like when I'm old, I could have, oh my gosh, look at the numbers on the screen. But it's like, do I want to work that hard? I might want to take my 40s and 50s off. I have no idea. It's really hard to say this season.
Man, I just saw a clip of an interview with Mark Cuban, right? Billionaire guy. And he was talking about how if you really want to be successful, you can't have work-life balance. He literally, like, you can't have work-life balance if you truly want to be successful in the way that he's successful, because he's like, there's someone else who's working 24/7 while you're sleeping, while you're finding your balance. They're out there grinding, they're making it work. And I think that was just a reminder for me of like, what's really important. Dude, last thing I'll share, Cody, I recently read the book Psychology of Money. And
great book.
it had been recommended to me a bunch of times. I'd never read it before, but there was this anecdote where I believe it was like a professor who was at this gala with all of these super impressive, super rich people. And the professor was talking to someone, and that the person he was talking to was like mentioning someone else in the room who was super, super rich, super successful. And the guy asked the professor, like, man, don't you wish you could be like him? And the professor says, well, I've got something that he'll never have. And the other guy says, well, like, what is that? And the professor says, I have enough. I've got enough. And that resonated with me so much, man, because I feel like most of my life, it's been this struggle between ambition and balance. And it's like people who are ambitious, they just want to keep going. They want to keep going. They want to keep going. But it's like, well, what is the point of that ambition? Like, what are you really trying to achieve? What you want is the freedom. But sometimes your ambition can work you into the point where you don't have the freedom that you're hoping to get. So trying to strike that balance a little bit better right now in the season of life, man.
Yeah, I think there's no issue with grinding while grinding feels good. Mm-hmm. I know, like, Alex Hormozy has been getting a lot of flack on social media lately, saying, miss your kid's dance recital, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, these are the things that it takes. But he's very clear about his goal. Like, he's like, I want to hit $1 billion. Like, and so to Mark Cuban's point, yeah, you might have to give up some of those things. But if you're cool with enough and you want freedom and you want family, then not everybody has to have the same goals. So I like how you're spelling that out for yourself.
Yeah.
Tony, where do you want to send people, man? This has been action-packed. I've been taking a bunch of notes. We have so many resources for people in the show notes. Where's the best place to send our listeners?
Yeah, dude. Cody, appreciate you having me, man. Really enjoyed this conversation as well. And dude, I appreciate you like having all you do. You do things about me that I've forgotten already. So I appreciate that, man. But guys, if you guys want to get in touch with me, probably the best place is on Instagram at Tony J Robinson. From there, you can find all the other things. But again, co-host the Real Estate Rookie podcast with BiggerPockets, and then one half of the Real Estate Robinson's YouTube channel with my wife Sarah. So those are all the places to find us.
And one more thing, because I think part of this episode, part of the reason I wanted to record with you in like an overarching theme was just overcoming obstacles. You didn't even mention this. Your oldest son's 17. I think you had it when you were like 16 and you were like a junior in high school or something.
Yeah, I was.
Okay. Yeah. So for those who are saying, well, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Tony did this. First deal, no money down. You had a kid at 16. Like you had all these obstacles in front of you. You didn't have, you were investing in Louisiana and you lived in California. You had all these obstacles and you just hopped over them with ease, man. So I know you're a humble guy. I think at your office or in one of the interviews I saw, like there's a sign behind you that said humble.
Yeah.
You're a humble dude. I know you probably wouldn't have puffed your feathers as much as I'm doing today, but man, you're a wealth of knowledge. I think people are really gonna love this episode and take action from it.
Cody, I appreciate that, man. And I do my best to try and give more value than I get back from folks. So I appreciate you having me on, and hope folks enjoy the conversation, man.